her husband on their 33-acre sheep farm in Warwick, Massachusetts. After a career in computers and finance, she received her MFA, she earned her MFA, I should say, in poetry from Vermont College in 2002, and now writes and teaches poetry workshops. And E.G. is a wonderful person. Thank you so much. This reading is brought to you by the Boylston Cultural Council and the Massachusetts Cultural Council and the library. So thank you all very much for coming, and I appreciate your visit. E.G.
Okay. I also want to thank the Boylston Library and Alexi Nin and for this reading being held and having a series on historical poetry. And also the Boylston Cultural Council. I just ended a term on the Warwick Cultural Council, so I know exactly what that's about. So I appreciate it. They do good work. And thank you, all of you, for coming and for paying your taxes so that the Massachusetts Cultural Council has some money. So this is my maiden reading, and I would love to have the book in hand, but as I have moaned to everyone here, I'm waiting for the Library of Congress, thank you, to issue a number, which was supposed to happen more than a month ago. And they say that it only takes 1 to 2 weeks, and I don't know if no one's there anymore, and so I don't know what's going on. So the book is coming, and no one's more anxious for that than I am. But this is a picture of the house that we took a few years after we moved in, and it's gone through many changes, both before and after. I found this house when I was at Vermont College after the residencies, and Eve can attest to this. Well, maybe you didn't feel it's stressful. And so I would just take the scenic route home and just decompress before I had to go back to being mom and all that. So I came across this coming from New Hampshire into Massachusetts, and I went over a ridge and I saw this house, and it had a pasture and 2 horses. It was so pastoral. So I saw a for sale sign, so I jotted the number down, and that was the beginning. So Warwick is in the north central part of Massachusetts. There's the New Hampshire border up there. Our farm is right at the very end of there. And the land that became Warwick was originally known by the Indian name of Shawmut. And in 1744, the early English settlers renamed the town Roxbury, Canada. And the origins of our farm go back to 1735, that would be really old, 735. 1735, when the court for the Majestics province in Massachusetts Bay voted to grant 4 tracts of land to become this property. The tracts were divided into 63 equal parts of 50 acres. And 3 of them, they did the minister, the school, and what was the other one they did? The meeting house. And those were the 63rd. Our farm is on the 62nd or 61st property that the lot was given. And the Whipple house, which is across the way, is the 62nd. Yep. And that's important because those 2 houses were sort of the first houses in Warwick. And the Whipple house was the oldest house in Warwick. It was still standing when we moved there. Unfortunately, the property's still owned by the Whipple family, but unfortunately they burned it down because they couldn't keep it from being invaded by teenagers, because we're in the middle of nowhere. There is no houses around. It's all forest and town forest. And so they couldn't keep it from being sort of a hangout. So they did burn it down, which we have a few pictures of it before. When the town was incorporated on February 17th, 1763, it was renamed once more and became Warwick in honor of the Earl of Warwick in England. The first poem is in two voices. Destination. You must go find the key for your farmhouse. Where is it? Hidden at the back of the black mailbox. What should I take? Clean water in a cut glass jar and a sense of trespass. What will I do there? Feast on the letters of the dead. Will anyone know me? You will be known only by your house's name. How do I get to this place? Find the collapsed barn where four roads meet. Whom will I see? An old farmer holding a bloody head by its horns. What should I ask him? Don't speak. Turn left at the corner. Proceed until the dirt lane ends. How will I know for sure? You won't. That was kind of a eerie way to find the house when I brought Tim to it. And here was this guy, he had just butchered a cow and he was walking across the street. And I was like, what is he holding? It was like, I wish I didn't know. So this poem is called Sister Houses, and it's about the Whipple house and the Weeks house is our farmhouse. Sister houses. We were built from the same forest, and from afar we look the same, set across from each other on a dirt road that snakes up the south side of a mountain covered in fir and oak. Our rooms smelled of wood smoke, kerosene, and endless cooking. We shared families and children's laughter as they ran up and down the staircases and around the hearth. Pine scrub tables bore dark rings from coffee mugs and cups of tea, where crumbs of conversation fell into cracks in wide plank floors worn smooth from heavy boots and sweeping. Between us, sugar maples lined the land cleared for cow pastures and orchards. Everywhere, stone walls and stacks of firewood grew, amid the earthen scent of rain and mud and dung. Hard work was a religion our people believed in, though the chapel bell in the valley called them away each Sabbath, sweat washed from their faces and good clothes. They sang hymns of here and heaven. Generations lived and left one by one. Now, deer bed down under apple trees, where we remain, faithful to the last. Silhouettes sleeping in a sepia landscape, bathed in moonlight, sheltered by sky. Christmas Day. Onto the wooded path, my dogs pull me past the thinking rock. The air is still and cold, bathed in that strange half-light of almost dusk. It has not been a year where words were easy. The ordinary miracles piled up, unrecorded. Here the pines sigh, hushed by robes of snow, as the dogs glory in icy tracks of creatures who have passed. The only proof of those we cannot see or hear. A lot of these walking poems are done on the Whipple's land because they have pastures still cleared and they log it more so that there's more places to walk on their land than on our land. So, lineage. Seeking the genealogy of this house and land is like piecing a spirit quilt together. The same names repeat every generation. Caleb, Sarah, Richard, Hannah, William, and Mary. Their children appear and disappear suddenly. Lung fever, croup, born still, oftentimes taking their mother with them into the grave. Reading elegant script belies the somber tone of each recorded event. Bewildered, I stand under the evening sky and question what I have in common with the women who have lived on this acreage. I lift my head when I hear them whisper in a sky bright with stars, the unchanging patterns all of us share. So the book is arranged in 5 sections, and the first 2 sections kind of are now thinking about doing the research for the book. And then the 3rd section is about the Weeks family, which lived there for 4 generations. And the next section is about when it was a cat house, which turns out not many young people know what that is. So when I teach, volunteer in schools, and they, do you raise cats? And I go, yes, we do. So let's not get into it. So anyway, the older residents, though, we did not know this when we bought the house. We did not know that it had this reputation. And we started to suspect things when people, the older gentlemen would say, well, don't put any red lights out for Christmas, har, har, har. Yeah, and it was like, okay. So we figured it out. In the 1770s, 2 brothers, William and Samuel Weeks, took possession of their family's land grant and built a 2-story Cape post and beam house on the northwestern corner of the acreage. When they both enlisted as soldiers in the Revolution, and I think it was all about the same time, so all these things happened in the 1770s. So it's really hard to pin down the exact date that this house was built. I know the Whipple house was there a few years earlier than this house. So they did not live in the house. Their brother Richard, their older brother Richard, who might have been, I don't know, too old to fight in the war, was the first recorded Weeks to live there with his wife Judith. And they had 7 children, including their son Caleb, who inherited the farm in 1813 when Richard died. He married Sarah. She gave birth to 9 children. Not all of them lived. Caleb and Sarah's son Richard took over the farm in 1855 after Caleb died, and he married Hannah. They lived during the period when there were epidemics and lots of things were starting to go. And this was still when there were Native Americans in the area, so it was not an easy life. Of their 8 children, they did lose 3 of their sons. So a lot of times what I would do is I spent more time on Ancestry researching the Weeks family than I've ever spent on my own. And I know more about them. I actually did a family chart and have all of them. It's very hard to get absolute information that you know is correct. You have to sort of combine sources and keep looking. I love to do research, so that was not a problem. And I would just go down these rabbit holes on Ancestry and just keep going and going. And my brother wants to do like the Thurston one, and I'm like, who cares, So what would happen is, from reading the different pieces of information, what they grew, there's always a census, or there's birth records, or there's death records. You start to piece together what their life must have been like. And so then I would start to imagine, and these poems are born from that, since they didn't really have, a lot of them couldn't even write. So this is Caleb Weeks, 1805. He pauses to lean against the door and watch early evening descend, takes a swig of cider from the flask tucked behind the slatted feed bin. A good day, another acre plowed to plant potatoes and field corn. Lifting the harness and traces from the sorrel horse, he leads him into the dark barn. 1 tin scoop of oats, then several forkfuls of hay pitched from high in the mow. Swallows peer down from the rafters. He breathes the scent of timothy mixed with sweat and manure. For him, there is no better chapel than these weathered wooden walls, listening to the contented chorus of chewing from the animals he loves. And this poem is Sarah's note. This is actually the first piece of information I found in person. I was on jury duty and I was waiting to be dismissed in Greenfield, so I wandered up to the deeds and I started having them pull deeds out of their records. And I found her asking the probate records for Caleb. Caleb died without a will. So attached to his probate was they auctioned off all of his property except the farm, which was heavily mortgaged. So that stayed in the family because it was heavily mortgaged. But all of his possessions, down to, and I was reading this to my husband last night, down to a silver spoon was 50 cents. Everything they had was listed on this long piece of paper, and the executor or whoever was doing the probate put the money at the bottom. So Sarah, this was attached to it, and she was asking the court if she could keep some of her possessions. So this poem is about that. What remains? Sarah Weeks, 1856. I have labored long for all these years on this forlorn farm, birthed and buried our babies, once within the same week. Caleb was a husband as good as he could manage. Summers he chopped wood and plowed furrows deeper into his brow. I kept my part of our bargain, but in the end have little to show. Caleb lies in the same ground that grew mostly stones. Intestate. In the end, he had no will. Now I pray and plead with the Lord and the court. Petition a probate judge to allow me to keep what was mine. My bed, a bureau, my Bible, and my rocking chair. One table, a chest, and a single light stand. The rest all gone, sold off to pay the debt that grew each season when the crops died or the cow dried up. Caleb had his bottle, and I my psalms and prayers. Alone, rocking, I remember my Caleb pulling me close, his ragged breath, his rough palms, burrowing under the worn quilt of night. And when Caleb died, Sarah, I have Ricola drops. Sarah, who actually went by the name Sally, stayed living on the farm with Caleb and his wife, with Richard, their son, and his wife Hannah. And if you want to get really confused, try to get all these people, and then they all named their sons after everybody else, and it's just like, okay, which Richard are we talking about? But that was the fun of it. So this poem is by Hannah. Hannah speaks. Most of my 42 years, I worked this farm with Richard. Summers spent chopping firewood and growing enough to feed us all. The few women who lived nearby were comfort. We gathered scraps of gossip stitched to the whisper of needles and thread and pieces of worn dresses and torn shirts. Someone was always with child, hands folded above the swelling, while the rest guessed girl or boy. But mostly, I worked and cooked, cleaned and washed all we had. We grew corn and potatoes, raised cattle, a sow, and sheep. My flowers were always wild ones, but I loved the pale purple blossoms of pole beans best, and the brambles, snowy blooms, and thorns and berries. When evening chores were finished, with the sun sinking behind the pines in the upper pasture, I closed my eyes and listened for the deer to come in quiet and browse beneath the orchard trees, where a mockingbird sat singing all he heard that long, God-filled day. My husband and children sound asleep. And I dated that one 1860 because right after that, Irving and, I forget the boy's name, Irving and It started with E, but they both died within 2 years of each other. And then their oldest son, Winfield Scott, died. And I found records that they actually had taken him to a hospital in Worcester, and he died of lung fever, I believe they called it. And I think he got encephalitis from it, from what I was reading. So this poem is called The Lost Boy, Winfield Scott Weeks, 1847 to 1856. The Lost Boy watches from the front window, murmurs as he strokes the ears of his smooth collie, who thumps her long tail, hoping for a walk. The rooms are empty, the hearth cold and quiet. But he remembers his mother singing as she stirred the iron kettle and kneaded bread. He had held his father's last hope along with his mother's heart. But when he died, his family took their grief and moved away. He never met his younger brother, Frederick, orphaned at 5 years, who grew to work in the wool trade, then started his own shoddy mill. His sisters married, assumed other names, and had their own children. Now they lie next to husbands in graves far from this old farm. Across the road, the sky glows red, then orange, as the sun sets past the hayfield where Jersey cows line up at the milk barn gate. He hears his mother's distant calls, but he is not ready to join her. Some souls stay tethered to a place. For him, this home is heaven enough. Lottie's Dream. This poem is for Charlotte H. Weeks, and she lived from 1853 to 1875. She was Richard and Hannah's third daughter, I believe, third child. When muddy spring arrives, mother has me on my knees, planting beans, while I slap at flies with filthy hands. I memorize vocabulary words and recite arithmetic sums inside my sweaty forehead. Journey, 13 times 8 equals 104. Forlorn. When mother returns inside to prepare supper for father and my 3 brothers, I sneak away, past the smelly barnyard, through stubby cornfields, then disappear. I slip into the cool, darkening woods, walk till I hear the swollen creek gushing over rocks. The slush and spring melt from the mountain rushes down a narrow channel that begins here on our farmland, then travels east. I dip my fingers clean into icy clear water, watch it tumble wild and free from any responsibilities. Papa says that these same drops flow into streams, then rivers, then all the way out to the harbor in the Atlantic Ocean. Soon I plan to leave and live in Boston, and if I get my way, attend the Teachers College, where I'll discover everything and find out the secrets I will never learn, still stuck on this farm, dreamily weeding dreary rows of boredom and endless beans. In 1963, Richard Weeks sold the farm to, I forget, all of the people who bought and sold this farm are in an appendix in the back of the book, which someone recommended I do. Thank you, Judy. So all of those people, because there are a lot of them. And it was later bought back into the family, but then fell out of the family again. So this is when Richard called it quits on the farm. And he died in New York 5 years after this, and he was working as a bookkeeper. And I think he was sending money back to Hannah, who was still in Massachusetts. So Richard Weeks' Lament, 1863. In the year before last, I still wanted to believe our troubles would vanish, but a stubborn evil persists and plants itself inside every crevice and crack of this faltering landscape. where planks from the fallen barn litter the fallow fields. All my heart tells me is to take up my family and leave this forlorn place, the house where I was born, our footsteps on the cart path, now erased by snow, gone, all the ways we were held here. Our places around the long table in the gathering room sit empty. We do not know where we will go. Our prayers will light our way. God save our souls. And they actually moved in with the Whipples across the street. So the census that year for 1965 has them all living with what children were still left. Let's see. So then we hit the more famous part of the farm's history, and that section is called Turbulent Times. And there was the Civil War, World War I, and the Depression. The house changed ownership 11 times. It went into foreclosure twice and was put up at public auction once. Finally, during the era of Prohibition, the farm fell into the hands of George F. Rivers, who decided to set the property up as a speakeasy and rural brothel. He purchased the farmhouse right over the New Hampshire border, and he set both of them up. So when the Massachusetts, that's Richmond, New Hampshire, when the Massachusetts agents would come to raid the premises, he simply moved everybody over to the Richmond, New Hampshire house. And when they would come, the New Hampshire authorities would come, he would move them all back. So he avoided capture or arrest for a long time. Finally, the two states coordinated their efforts and conducted raids at the same time, resulting in George Rivers' arrest and incarceration. During his time in prison, he deeded the property over to his housekeeper, Bernice Billy Whisk. She again took ownership after he defaulted on the mortgage and continued to live on the farm until almost 1990. And this is an early picture of Billy with her dog Sally, which there's a better picture of later. And this is when I believe the house looked pretty much like this from the time it was built, with white clapboards. But there are no pictures because they didn't have a lot of photography. I spent more time on Ancestry and everywhere trying to find pictures of the Weeks than I've spent doing anything. They were poor. They did not have pictures. So I'm still trying to find pictures. I have teased out all of the children and the grandchildren and talked to people who were their great-great-grandchildren, but no one has pictures. So I guess I'm just going to know what Billy and those people look like. I can't find George either, though. I know where he's buried, but that doesn't do me a lot of good for his pictures. So the first poem in this section is called Everlings. Wonder how we can be content beneath these posts and beams, insulated from the world outside. Shed snakeskins and rodent skeletons fill crevices and laugh in plaster walls, where the laughter of ladies titters amongst the rooms covered in faded pink roses and soot. Outside, the moon fills with light, illuminating the night where owls blink and hoots are given back to the lone coyote bark. This poem is called Prohibition, 1929. Night becomes a different country when the regulars drive up the road. Billy's black terrier starts to bark at each rap of knuckles on the door. Boots climb the narrow staircase. Rooms bloom with cabbage roses as the scents of sweat, moonshine, and sweet perfume saturate the air. From downstairs come the sounds of cards shuffling, the old Victrola scratching out Louis Armstrong and Al Jolson 78s. In 100 years, our names will be forgotten, but this house remains a witness to 13 years when the country meant to outlaw sin, but merely moved its purchase to the outskirts of a righteous town. One issue, though, that I found is there are still people connected with this period, and their descendants are still around. So a lot of this I purposely did not put into poetry, because I feel like the house deserves its dignity, the people deserve their dignity, and their relatives deserve it. So I was very careful about it and what I said. So, Speakeasy, 1935. They come as darkness falls, eager footsteps with furtive glances up and down the road. Whatever circumstances may have drawn them to our door, we welcome each one inside. In this place, truth and lies often wear the same disguise. Secrets remain safe with us. Nothing they say here leaves, though later we will whisper whatever sorrows they share. They toast with amber courage, then follow us into dim rooms where kerosene lamps flicker. Some hold us a little too tight, but most just want the comfort of any woman's warm bosom. When their breath gets heavy, we listen for the mantel clock, counting each half-hour chime. They will rise again and leave before morning's naked eye shines down on us once more. It's sort of hard to put yourself in that position, so writing these poems came after the weeks. The weeks' poems were easier for me. These were not easy. Once upon a time, when I was small, Papa gave me a china doll in a blue silk dress. I'd brush her blonde hair each night while Mama read me fairy tales. Now, I spend early evenings waiting for a different bedtime and listen to the stories men tell themselves when they reach for me in the dark. I watch them put on their other lives, return to their wives and daughters. But I wonder if they think of me as they work in fields or factories. Afternoons, I walk into the woods as birds compose their love songs. I look for lady slippers and trillium, a bit of beauty I can keep in a jar that I'll place next to the headboard on an old trunk from home, my hope chest, where a doll with golden hair waits, her glassy eyes shut tight. And one of the very last poems I wrote for this was in the voice of George Rivers, which I also had some trouble with. I was going to go stand on his grave to see if he'd tell me anything, but I doubt it. So George Rivers, 1883 to 1963, and the epigraph is a news article that a very kind woman in Warwick found in the Historical Society. Warwick News, May 3rd, 1937, George F. Rivers of Richmond Road was found guilty in Orange District Court of maintaining a house of ill fame. I've seldom known a trouble that liquor couldn't solve. Rumor was I won this farm in a game of high-stakes poker. Then my bootleg business began, corn whiskey and bathtub gin. The girls came later, proving that every pleasure has its price. Sunday mornings, we all prayed that God would forget our sins. I was the only one he punished. Hard time in a cold prison cell. Now Billy tends her flowers, and I wind the old Victrola, wishing for what came before rheumatism and bankrupt dreams, until I'm buried deep in the back of that same damn cemetery with all those folks who believed they were holier than me. And the last poem in that section is for Billy, who lived there from George Rivers' death until I guess her family, when the 1980s, she developed dementia, and they put her in a nursing home. The Last Lady, 1930 to 1980, for Billy. There are stories told about the lone woman who inhabited this house for 50 years. She kept herself to herself with no apologies. Before indoor plumbing, she owned a telephone so the farmer down the road could call to warn her when the police were headed her way. She kept guinea fowl, hens with polka dot plumage, known for raising a ruckus, sounding sirens of alarm whenever they sensed danger. Tough living and old habits carved a long, stubborn streak. Surviving the Depression, she fed guests pig's ear soup served up with stale bread. But every spring she cut a floral bouquet for her sister, deep purple irises arranged in a slender antique vase of gleaming carnival glass. And at midnight, on the last night of December, she'd walk the 200 feet to New Hampshire, place one foot in each state, and drink a toast to one more year. Those are all true anecdotes about her. And I was very fortunate to have her sister, before her sister died, and her niece come and have tea at the house. And they brought pictures and they told me stories about it. And I didn't ask all the questions I really wanted to know the answers to. So they were wonderful people. But those were the stories. So Caleb Mitchell, he was Caleb and Sarah's grandson, purchased the farm back, then sold it to his Aunt Angeline, who was Caleb and Sarah's younger daughter, in 1870. But with the Civil War and influenza outbreaks, they finally sold it out of the family in 1875, and then it just went through people who owned it for like a year to 2 years until George Rivers bought it. And the last part is when we lived there. Spring forward. For months, the old horse stood at the back gate, staring into eternity. This winter stole light from my eyes, pried life from my hands, too weak to hold the breath, leaving the beings I love. I have prayed with words no one understands. Loss is a language all its own. Maybe prayers are the sap that seeps from the maples, sweet rivulets collected in tin buckets with tented lids. Or the crocuses I planted last fall by the picket fence. Even now, when I cannot follow a straight line of thought in my scrambled mind, words still scatter onto paper and wait for light. This poem is called Sky Meadow. We search all our days for a place called home, hoping that walls and windows will keep us safe inside. As our skin grows loose over our bones and our sight softens the landscape, we discover home might be hidden in a meadow amid murmurs of green and sun-gold blossoms rising all around our feet. This will be the place we return to when we remember our lives, knowing the shelter that held us as the water blue sky came down with a peace that could hardly last. Oh, there's Sally. And I'm not sure whose cars those were, whether they were customers or I'm not sure. But someone was just telling me that all the campers would come and the men would say they were going hunting and they would park in the pasture and stay there, and it's just like, I'm trying to picture these things are interesting. I go upstairs and I think, it's interesting. So since moving here, I've come to understand that a place can possess its own power. Whether it was fate or happenstance that led me here, I have a deep affinity for the house. And in 2018, I was half-heartedly opening some Christmas cards, and I threw it, and I was stunned to realize that a card, our financial advisor, whom I've never met in California, had sent me a card with the picture of our farm on it. And so, of course, I had to figure out how did he get this, And when we called him, he said, I didn't know that was your farm. And it's like, yes, this is our farm. The fence is different. The charger is still on the tree there for the pasture. So I called the greeting card company, and a photographer had taken the picture during a snowstorm around 2005, then sold it to a business greeting card company in Minnesota in 2012. And then in 2018, it got sent to us. So I was stunned. But that is, I know, but that is the kind of thing that happens in this house a lot. So Yeah, it is haunted, but they're happy people, so that's okay. So, but the last part here, as I walk the farm now with our dogs, I think about the Weeks family and all the trials and tribulations they had and all the troubles and sorrows, and how they didn't have any clue that this house was going to go through all these changes, was going to become a speakeasy. And one reason I did all of this is to restore the house's dignity, because it wasn't mentioned in any of the historical books. It was just, oh, it's the cat house. We don't talk about that. So I felt like the Weeks should have their day and they should come back. And the people who were there during Prohibition, who is it for me to judge what they were doing, to keep themselves going through the Great Depression and all that. So, so many changes, and I know that soon, at some point, new owners will take over and they will have their dreams and their families in this. So just a few more poems and then I will let you go. Gratitude. After an hour of down dog and forward fold, we drive the narrow road home, sun sinking in a molten sky, where strips of clouds stretch and wrap around the horizon. You wonder about squirrels digging acorns under road salt. I wonder whether poetry will ever come back to me. After barn chores, feeding the crew of cats and dogs, I sit waiting, a zazen of hope, legs crossed and mind open, watching each breath rise, then fall back into the world, which is dark now, but I hear the muses, quiet, then question, their single syllable that calls out into the still and cold night. Here's your break. I think I have time to read 2 chicken poems, just to take you out of the seriousness. Pullet surprise. The chickens are optimistic. Each has an elegant name. Gertrude and Sylvia are buff crosses with exotic faces, hard to tell apart. Bernice, the sex-link, struts about the coop, fluffing her emerald feathers. She's the one the dog has her eye on. Shy, yellow Letitia dashes around in dizzy circles as if she has lost her head. The girls, my husband calls them. They run to him, perch on his arms, and peck at his wedding band. So this actually is this poem, which I told him too soon. Ruling the roost. So there's no children here. Okay, great. Rudy enters, comb erect, red-headed and ready, sidestepping with his black feathered feet, tail plumage held high, gleaming like an oil slick. The young pullets, all smitten, fall under his spell. The hens, old libbers, resist his cocksure advances, knowing a rooster's not needed to lay fresh eggs. But Rudy's undaunted and patrols the perimeter, his speckled chest puffed, fluffing his ruffled red collar. He approaches each grand dame with a majestic sweep of one scarlet wing held out like a matador's cape. Though the old hens appear unimpressed, one by one he woos them away from their maidenly habits. Now Rudy boasts all day, horny, henpecked, happy. Oh, sorry, this went with the poem I'm not reading. This is Billy in 1980s, and this is the catalpa tree that I believe she planted, which I do have a poem about it in the book. And then that was then, and this is now. And this is the new barn that we put, which I think is pretty much in the same space. Winter storm. In the first snow, we walk down the unplowed road. Both dogs, unleashed, run in zigzags ahead, bare bells jangling on collars. After a mile or longer, we reach the red slashes that tell us to turn back before time runs out as dusk drifts down. We listen for gunshots, black powder discharge that peppers the silence. The deer have hidden deep in stands of pine and fir. The way home seems short, but the final incline's climb is tough on creaking knees. The dogs have disappeared over the rise to sit and wait next to the dark green door. Inside is a wood stove, hot tea in glazed mugs, apple cake, and the evening news to bicker over until bed. Yet, when I lie counting both sheep and blessings, the familiar prayer I'll add is to ask for just one more day, the same as this one. The House Speaks, the last poem in the book. 2 centuries I have stood as the land changed around me. Trees towered, disappeared, as forest became pasture, and then forest once more. I remember strong men who nailed posts and beams, singing hymns of beginning. Clapboards dressed me then, and windows of single panes. So many coats of paint, peeling, scraped, then wooden shingles, green, then red, then green again. Electric wires entered my walls, iron pipes snaked into my cellar. Most can no longer hear the voices, but I hear their echoes, the laughter, the sorrows, and sometimes anger. All the souls who have lived here have left the imprint of their spirits. As time settles my frame, timbers creak a steady lullaby to summon the ghosts each night who keep watch in constant vigil to protect and turn away any threat or harm. All I ask is for you never to leave me empty. Fill me with flowers and music. Keep a lantern burning in the window, a beacon of light that will welcome you back home. This is the house after they did the clapboards. They did the shingles on it, and they put this porch on the side and then a portico on the front. And the guy that took the house, he bought the house in like 1998, ripped all that off, painted it red, and started doing the inside over as if it was a Civil War house, which it wasn't. So we've had to undo a lot of those things. And I think he did not know that it was a house of ill repute, because as soon as he figured that out, he sold it. He was like, he didn't, I have my own suspicion that the ghosts, if they don't like you, you're out of there. So he couldn't wait to get out of there. He left and left all his possessions in it. He was just like booking out of there. So yeah, we bought it. It had fallen through for sale 3 times. And then I just kept checking on it. And then we bought it in 2000. So, and now it looks like this. It's back to green. And it wasn't conscious that we did that, but it's back to green. I think Billy had something to do with it. But yeah, we put an addition on. I don't think we would have made it through COVID without it. It was a very small house. And that's the garage. And the barn is in back. And the only cleared land is the pasture. So it's like, what, about an acre cleared. So we should probably have it logged, but I haven't worked up the courage to do it. So were there any questions? Yes?
Well, it's just more of a comment. The wonderful thing about what your book does is it gives you this sense of we're all where we are now, in our homes, in our apartments, wherever we are. And it's that sense of, do we appreciate that we're not going to be here?
Right, yeah.
And someone else will. And it's okay, because we're all part of a big sequence. And I think that, maybe that's just a little tap of wisdom that finally comes to people.
Yeah.
And it's an acceptance that is rather nice.
Right. In a way, it's comforting.
Yes. So thank you for that. That's what you did for me.
I think that, the house, it's just always felt right. It's just always felt, and I actually had a psychic come in, and that's when I wrote the Winfield Scott Weeks poem, is because he said that he could sense someone up in the window looking out at the road and just watching. and it was just, I don't know that I believe in that, but that's what he said. And he also said that there was at least one person who met their demise during the Prohibition. I guess they're buried somewhere in the back. I'm not going to look for them. So anyway, so someone that didn't make it. So anyway, but thank you so much for listening.
So why did you have to go through three times?
Oh, it was sold to, yeah, it was sold to other people, and it just kept falling through.
Because the house didn't want them.
Yeah, the one, I guess not. Well, there's a poem in the.
The interesting thing is that it was falling through mostly because the well would not pass.
Yeah, it was a shallow well.
It was a shallow well, and the owner at the time, Jim, the guy who did it, he'd try to shock the well, and then it wouldn't pass because it had too much chlorine in it. And then the chlorine would come out and frogs would go back.
Yeah, it had frogs living in it.
Therefore, you couldn't get a mortgage on it. So
it needed a lot of work. Let's just say that. It still does, because, you know, people are like, oh, the house is old. Yes, that means it's just always trying to fall down. Yeah. But yeah, no, it kept falling through. And there's another poem in the book about one point we had ducks, and they were digging through in back, and I went outside and they had dug up this icon, and it was St. Francis, or no, it was Joseph upside down, buried, and that's a superstition, or you know, a belief that the house will remain unsettled. It's to help sell the house. I'm not sure who buried it. So that's why I think Jim is he just was like, see ya, I'm out of here. I don't think he liked the house, and he also ran out of money to do it. So anyway, but it's been a trip. It's been quite the experience. And what is very isolating about it is there are no neighbors. I kind of like that in a way, and sometimes it's not a good thing. But the nearest neighbor is how far away? About a mile away. So, and we're the end of the electric. And so I tell the story all the time that, you know, when the power would go out before we had a generator, I would call and they would say, well, look out, do your neighbors have lights? We have no neighbors. And then sweet young things would always say, well, what about the street lights? There are no street lights. So that was the way that was. So it's been a trip. It took me 10 years to do this research, and here is some of the research that I've done on it. But precious little is available, so every morsel you get, you feel like, yeah. But trying to find a picture of the weeks has just been my bugaboo that I want. And the closest I've ever gotten, and I don't think I can probably put my hands on it, is a great-great-grandson. I finally found, here it is. This is his, when he went into the sea, he was a Seaman's Certificate of American Citizenship. So, and he lived in Saratoga Springs, New York. So he's like a great-great-grandson. And Caleb Weeks Mitchell Jr., and that was his picture, and that's it. And I felt like I had won the lottery. It's like, oh my God, it's a Weeks. So anyway, anyway.
Looking forward to the book.
Thank you.
What's ironic is our family has some Weeks.
Oh, do they?
Yes.
Maybe I need.
I believe they're Maine.
Yes. Yep.
A lot of Weekses are in the Maine.
Yeah, and a lot of the wives, Hannah was from Maine, Sarah was from Maine. So the Weeks all married women from Maine. And George Rivers was born in Lewiston, Maine. So Maine was, I don't know if that was where you got your wife back then. But I do know that some of the branches are in New Hampshire. Joseph Weeks was Richard was Caleb Weeks' brother. He was a judge in Winchester, New Hampshire, which is right over the border. And so I've got a folder on every one of them. And the problem was also when you're searching for the daughters married, they lost their name. You have to really keep digging. So, and a lot of times you just don't find correct information. Even if it's in a published book, like, no, that's not right. I know that's not right. But that's what you have. So you just have to keep digging. So what's the first name of the Weeks that lived there?
Well, let's see. My brother-in-law is Gareth DeForest.
Ah,
His son is Grant DeForest. Now they have Gordon DeForest.
wow.
So they give each son
Yeah,
DeForest name.
Yeah, I have to hand it to the Weeks, though, because for such a common last name, they really kept their names right straight down every generation. So in that way, it kind of makes it easy. It makes it hard because you don't know which one you're looking at, but it makes it easy because, oh, that's got to be a relative if they have the same first and middle name.
George DeForest.
Ah.
So it's all the G's.
Ah. You have the G's.
So Gordon was.
Gordon, there you go. You were saying something, Pat?
I just appreciate the honesty and the delicacy that is evident in your poetry. Thank you. About these stories.
Yeah, I know more than I wanted to. I just don't feel like that's my place. And it has nothing really to do with the house. And really, this is the book about that, trying to restore the dignity to the house and have it. Even the Historical Commission, they finally put it in the last book because I started attending the meetings. So anyway, well, thank you so much.